Welcome to the Jeremiah Show. The little Bose Wave radio set sat on a shelf facing north towards Malibu. It was yellowed and faded from its exposure to the sun, but the sound was still good. Most days it was on 24 hours. It softly played jazz music, picked up from LA's K Jazz station 88.1. It welcomed me when I got home and soothed me to sleep each night. It was always there, it was always on, and I came to depend on it and the soft sounds of jazz. The sliding glass doors faced north too. The doors were always open to the balcony on the 14th floor. You could follow the Pacific Coast Highway with your eyes to Point Mugu. The endless Pacific Ocean disappeared at the horizon, and by day, sparkled in the sunshine, and by night, the moonlight. If you leaned over the balcony real far, you would see Muscle Beach and the people that looked the size of ants playing volleyball far below. The rooms were filled with sea air, wisps of fog, a touch of vertigo, and jazz music. This was my favorite place in the whole world. Today, as I played John Beasley's new recording, Returning to Forever, with the Frankfurt Radio Big Band, suddenly, without any warning, I was back there again. I was in a dream state. And when the album ended, I didn't want the feeling to leave me yet. I went to Spotify and I found Chick Corea's original 1974 album, Return to Forever, and I stayed a little longer. My special guest today is John Beasley. He's a conductor, a record producer, a music director, and educator who has contributed to countless memorable, critically acclaimed projects. His new album is Returning to Forever with the Frankfurt Radio Big Band. The music of Chick Corea's Return to Forever is reimagined and honoring the legacy of Chick Corea. Recorded by Grammy-nominated Frankfurt Radio Big Band and multi-Grammy winner John Beasley. 12 nominations, 2 wins. Congratulations, John. John turned down an Oboe Scholarship from Juilliard right out of high school to play in Southern California clubs. He soon became a busy studio musician, writing for television series and playing piano on film scores and commercials. His television work includes composing for Star Trek, The Next Generation, for Cheers and Fame, and writing arrangements for American Idol and The Tonight Show. For over 30 years, he has been a part of the 15-time Oscar-nominated film composer Thomas Newman's crew. He's worked on films like 1917, James Bond's Skyfall and Spectre, Finding Dory, and Shawshank Redemption. In his 20s, he worked as a keyboardist with both Miles Davis and Freddie Hubbard. He had a long time association with Diana Reeves, and he's collaborated with Christian McBride, John Patitucci, Shaka Khan, Dave Grusin, Lee Ritenour, Steely Dan, Queen Latifah, and Chucho Valdez. John Beasley has written commissions for the Los Angeles Philharmonic Youth Orchestra and Carnegie Hall's National Youth Orchestra. He's working on a symphonic commission with the Royal Stockholm Philharmonic Orchestra. And as an educator, he has conducted master classes worldwide. Again, he has earned 12 Grammy nominations and he's won 2. Welcome, John, to the Jeremiah Show. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on your show.
It's about time. Where you been? You've been busy. You've been out there playing. I'm so happy to have you here finally. So let's start right here. Who was Chick Corea, the man and the musician?
Chick Corea was a talented, incredibly talented young man from Boston. He played in his father's dance bands and played drums and piano, made his way to Juilliard before they had a jazz department, and had to like sneak away with Hubert Laws to play jazz there, off campus or late at night in the practice room,
Why sneak away?
because New York, because Juilliard did not have a jazz program and they forbid it.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah. It's only recently that they've had a jazz department within, I don't know, 20 years or 10 years or something like that. And then being in New York as a student, he took New York by storm, played with Blue Mitchell, Elvin Jones, Sarah Vaughan, and then Miles Davis. He played on the original Bitches Brew record, the original Fusion record. And that's where he met
Incredible.
Lenny White, who was also a member of Return to Forever. So eventually he left Miles and started making all kinds of records. One of my favorites was Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. And then I heard Light as a Feather. I was probably in ninth grade. And it totally blew me away. It changed my life. And that was the first version of Return to Forever, the so-called Brazilian version. And it had Ayrton on drums, Flora Purin singing, Joe Farrell, who my parents went to college with. So that was really special for me. They knew him on flute and saxophone, and Chick on piano, and a very young, who was only like, what, 5 or 6 years older than me, Stanley Clark on bass,
Jeez.
19 or 20.
What a lineup.
Yeah, right. And I just wore that record out. And then, like a lot of,
Literally.
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. Second vinyl by now. Um, and like a lot of jazz musicians and a lot of jazz fans, you pick up a record and you go, oh, I want to check out Stanley Clark. He's on this record. I'm going to find some more stuff that he's playing on. So I went to the record store and I find this CTI record. It's a Joe Farrell record with Stanley Clark on it. I'm going, oh, that's cool. It's a 2-for-1. So I wore that record out and got introduced to Jack DeJohnette through that record. Right. And so the list goes on and on. If
One led to the next.
I was a Coltrane fan. So, I'm looking for Elvin Jones records. Oh, there's Chick Corea on this Elvin Jones record, along with Joe Farrell. So the family gets bigger, the list gets bigger. And, a few years later, he puts out an electric version of Return to Forever. All electric keyboards, mostly electric bass. So Stanley's still there, but he's got Lenny White playing drums now from Bitches Brew. And he's got Bill Connors on this first record, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, playing guitar. And it's completely different, man. It's like, it's the big F word, fusion, right? And it's intense, it's loud, it's rock. I'm still a teenager, so I'm into rock, and it was a perfect crossover record. And then had all those records, and then of course, if you're into fusion at that age, like I was, Herbie Hancock's Handrunners record totally blew me away. Thrust. I'm listening to Weather Report, Miles, the music of our generation, right?
Yeah, and I'm gonna give away the surprise ending here, but you got to work with Chick Corea. You knew him, you met him, but what it like? There's so many stories when I hear musicians, and their work speaks for themselves when they're at a level as he is, as you are. Their music is the expression of who they are, but you rarely hear who the man is or the woman, who the person is behind that. And Chick Corea, was he everything in meeting him and working with him that you had imagined as a young fan, discovering his work? And what is something about him that really stood out that people may not know about who he was as a person, aside from a musician?
I met Chick working on John Patitucci's first record that Chick produced. John Patitucci was in sort of the next version of the Electric Band, or he was in Chick Corea's Electric Band, which was Chick's second electric project. Is that a good way to put that? Something like that, right? And this was in the 80s. But I had met John playing with Hubert Laws when we were, I don't know, 20, 21, something like that. And So when John got his record deal with GRP, Chick produced the first two records. And so I'm nervous. I'm meeting one of my heroes. I want to play good. He's there, and he couldn't have been more supportive. He was amazing. He was patient. I even played it on a track with him. Um, and he was just like one of us, no ego. And I see that a lot with really great artists. They learned to put their ego at rest when they're sitting down and making music. You can't really make music and have your ego front and center at the same time. It doesn't really work.
It's an interesting thought. Yeah, that
A lot of people have egos, before and after, but when you're actually doing it, anyway, Chick has always been very supportive. Then he used to have these Valentine's Day parties because he lived here. The 80s was a fertile ground for jazz, in LA. We had Wayne
describe
Shorter,
it.
Herbie Hancock,
Mhm.
Freddie Hubbard, Stanley Clark, um, Joe Farrell, um, and Tony Williams and Joe Henderson and Bobby Hutcherson up north in San Francisco. So all these guys were living there and had bands, LA bands traveling with them. So that's how I got to play with Freddie. And Miles was living here. He's living in Malibu, probably not too far from you. And so I forget what my point was, but it was fertile ground. So
Mhm.
he used to have these parties for Valentine's Day, and he'd invite everybody, and everybody would come in and play, you know. And so after those first few record dates, I was there hanging and meeting all these people, and um, eventually meeting Freddie Hubbard and Wayne Shorter, who I've known since then as well. Anyway, very supportive guy, talented, completely dedicated musician, like 24/7, writing music, practicing music, on the road, touring, you know.
Do you compare any traits that you have? Because you're an incredibly prolific musician and artist, and you're constantly working, constantly touring, constantly putting out material and working with these great musicians. Is there anything that you learned from him subconsciously or subconsciously that you admired and you've worked into your own creative path?
I admired his tenacity and his discipline, and of course his talent, his huge talent. But these things, after a while, I got into, I knew that he established a certain time of the day to do music, and he tried to stick to that. Even during the pandemic, he had these FaceTime live things during his practice time, and it was always the same time of day. So I either try to do this, when I wake up, before I get into phone calls or any of this stuff, I try to hit the piano and write, practice for a little while, and then I'm a much better person, after that to deal with because I've done something for
Mhm.
myself that I love to do, right? First. And then he told me about 10 years ago, we ran into each other in Tokyo. And uh, I said, well, where are you going after the gig? He said, well, I'm going back to the room because now what I do is I go back to the hotel and I practice and I write after the gig because I find that he found that he still had all the flow going, right?
Yeah, I bet.
Gig energy going. So
Yeah.
that's when he would write, and he would be very consistent about it. The other thing he said is that, and Miles said this to me too. You know, you should have your own bands and you should make your own music. And Chick did that his whole life. He was like Miles. He changed music, he changed character, practically with every project.
Well, I want to talk about the new project, your new album, but I wanted before we leave this conversation, I loved what you said that you wake up in the morning, you have your own time set aside that's dedicated that hopefully nobody interrupts. That it's time to play. You get on the piano and you're a better person after that. Why do you think I mean, I hear people, they say they run or they walk or they get their adrenaline, they've got to go do that for themselves in the morning or start their day, and then they're a much better person. It sounds like music is that for you. And why do you suppose it affects you that way, where you face the day differently?
Because I've accomplished the most basic thing that makes me happy early. And it just happens to be my work, but it's also what I love to do. And, as a musician and an artist, there's all kinds of responsibilities too, musical responsibility. I have deadlines. And if I feel like I've accomplished a certain amount of work every day or music, I can a little breathe easier, and deal with the more not unpleasant, but the more normal things to do, and not feel like I got to get to this. I got to get to this in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a
The things that,
meditator. I do yoga, you know.
how early do you start your day on the piano or doing something musically?
Not too early.
You're a musician after all.
Yeah. And, I first learned about this reading an article, an interview with the playwright Norman Mailer, who, when he lived in New York, he got up every morning at a certain time and put on his coat and tie, went to his writing office and wrote for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, whether he got good stuff or not, because it trains your brain that that is your time,
Yeah.
creative space, and your body gets into that rhythm, and that's when it happens. And he said, sometimes, often more than not, you don't get good stuff, but you know,
Well,
your
John,
body.
you just taught me something that maybe through Chick Corea or Norman Mailer, but I'm actually going to borrow that, because I think what I do is get up and start doing the emails and all the business. And then you're right, your day gets away and you're like, I can't get back there now. I can't go back to what was good for me, creativity or whatever that it might be. So I'm going to take that tip. Thank you. Can I borrow it?
Yeah, and you
As
get
a left.
for me, I get rid of my musical routine before the business side kicks in.
Right.
Takes a lot
That's a
longer.
great idea. Really great idea. I don't know why I haven't thought about it before this. Okay, so we're going to take a break here in just a moment. But before we do, and just to set it up here, I wanted to Chick Corea's Return to Forever. I believe it was 1974, right? It was released in 74,
The first one was 72.
72. Oh,
First band was together 72, 73, and then they might have started recording in 73, the electric version, and I think Hymn of the Seventh Gallery was 74 or 70.
okay. So set it up for us before we go to commercial break, and we'll catch up on it on the other side. But Return to Forever is the album, right? Why did this album speak to you at this time in the last few years as something that you wanted to reimagine? And don't give away what the reimagining is yet, but if you could say, what is this album? Talk about the album a little bit and the history, if you would, or what it meant to you.
Well, it's not really a record. It's a series of one, two, I think 6 records, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
two bands with 2 different styles, right? One for 2 years, and then the one that's the electric version with Lenny White and those guys is, I think, 4 or 5 records.
Okay. And
So
different phases, right? Different phases of the
yeah,
band. Yeah.
yeah. So it's more reimagining both projects, both bands, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah. So ask me again now.
Well, I hadn't. I'm familiar with Chick Corea's work, but I hadn't. Like, I went to Spotify to find. I thought it was an album, but then I do realize I've read up the history on it, so I was confused if it's a band that they refer to, but I thought it was one album because I found an album on Spotify.
Well, the first record of the first band is called Returning to Forever. And it has, Return to Forever. And it has the seagull on it. I don't know if you,
That's the one I found. Yes.
So that's the first recording that they made as a band, right, with the Brazilian group.
Okay.
But it was actually released in the States after Light as a Feather. So that's what's confusing it a bit. His band was called Return. His band was called Return to Forever, and he had two versions of that band. One with the Brazilian group, and then one with the electric band.
So you looked at the whole project and the whole the time and the bands, and then you said what?
I wanted
How
to
did you
draw,
come to this idea?
I wanted to draw material from that whole era, right? And I was actually asked to do it. It was a commission by the Frankfurt Radio Big Band. I was there making a record and doing concerts with Somi, who's a great vocalist, and we were having dinner with the band manager, uh, the artistic director, if you will, of the band, and we were talking about other future projects. What can we do together again? And I asked him, well, what's your instrument? And he said, guitar. And I said, well, who do you like? He said, man, I love fusion. And I said, oh, and something just clicked in me. And I said, oh, we should do a reimagining of Return to Forever, because it's Al Di Meola, it's Guitar Hero time, right? And he loved the idea immediately and said, yeah, let's do that. So that's how it happened.
Okay, we're gonna listen to some music here from the new album by John Beasley, Returning to Forever. We're gonna go to break here with Captain Senior Mouse. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. We're gonna go to break with Space Circus, which I love. That might be my favorite song if I can pick one off this album for me right now. I love Space Circus. So we're going to and then we're going to go out with Medieval Overture off the album Returning to Forever. John Beasley's my special guest today. His new album, one more time, is Returning to Forever with the Frankfurt Radio Big Band. The music of Chick Corea's Return to Forever reimagined, honoring the legacy of Chick Corea. You can go to johnbeasleymusic.com. I'm going to spell John Beasley's last name, Beasley, johnbeasleymusic.com. You can follow him on Instagram at John Beasley Official, and also on Threads at John Beasley Official. And pick up the album at Candid Records or probably right off your website, johnbeasleymusic.com. We'll be right back. Here is Medieval Overture off the album Returning to Forever.